Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit China for informal talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping from Friday to Saturday. The visit comes against the backdrop of a series of high-level interactions between the two countries, starting from China's top diplomat Wang Yi's visit to India last December, the first high-level exchange after the Donglang border friction last summer. Military personnel from both countries faced off for 73 days in the Himalayan region before tensions eased ahead of the BRICS summit in Xiamen, China. Since then, a lot of water has flown under the bridge. What can we expect from the Xi-Modi summit this week, and what will it mean for Sino-Indian relations? I'm pleased to be joined in New Delhi by Professor Shrikant Kondapalli from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and in Beijing by Professor Zhang Junshe, Vice President of the Naval Research Institute of China. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Professor Kondapalli, explain to us how is this upcoming meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi viewed in India by the press and by the academics?
Well, there is a lot of euphoria in India about the upcoming meeting between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi. Partly because we have reached a level of nadir in the bilateral relations, as you mentioned, in the Tunglang Doklam area last year. Although trade has increased marginally, while we have not kept the $100 billion target, yet there has been some momentum forward. Yet I think the last year's events have had a huge impact on the bilateral relations. So to that extent, there is a lot of euphoria in India about the Prime Minister's visit to Wuhan to meet with President Xi Jinping. The expectations obviously are in terms of border stability. As you know, that the territorial dispute has not been resolved between the two countries. And last year, the number of border transgressions have increased to about 426 odd, as compared to nearly 200 the previous year. This has resulted in some kind of instability on the territorial aspects. Secondly, there is also the issue of globalization. Both sides have had common position on globalization in terms of the countering trade protectionism.
Right.
If you compare President Xi Jinping's speech in Davos and Prime Minister Modi's speech in Davos, the common perspective on globalization and against trade protectionism is visible.
Right.
Thirdly,
Professor
in terms of
Kondapalli.
multipolarity.
Yeah. Right. Professor
SCO
Kondapalli, hold it there, please. Let's go through some of the points that you mentioned just now, which I think it's very important. I hope we'll have the time to address the border issue, the globalization, and the multipolar world. Let's see how much time we have. But Professor Zhang Junshe, against what backdrop is China and India continue to warm up their relationship with this informal summit?
Well, just as you said, my counterpart in India said that ever since the Donglang military standoff last year, I think the bilateral relationship between the two countries have been improving, both economically and militarily. And also, I think it is reported that Mr. Modi's government now is facing some issues, both internally and internationally. Internally, maybe there are some critics in India say that his demonetization issue maybe is affecting the economy. And also, many people now in India think that the improvement of the bilateral relationship is in the fundamental interest of India as well as China. So most of the people in India now support the improvement of the bilateral relations. Internationally, just as you said that now both China and India support the multilateral trade system and oppose to unilateral and trade protectionism. And we know that also India is concerned about its trade of services, especially to the United States. So I think these two countries, China and India, share the common views on the free trade system. So we can find some areas and ways to strengthen the cooperation between our two countries, not only in politics, but also economy, trade, and military field.
Right. What kind of profound changes, in the words of China's top diplomat Wang Yi, that we are looking at for both countries in today's world, Professor Kondapalli, and how has these changes brought India and China together? Closer, let's say.
I think the speech by Foreign Minister Wang Yi should be seen in the context of recent developments. For example, the Trans-Pacific Partnership revocation. Secondly, the Brexit by United Kingdom. The third event is in terms of climate change proposals not being implemented by several states. And the trade that has relatively less growth rates last year. This has resulted in a lot of trouble for the export-oriented economies, and the overall security situation after the missile strikes on Syria. These have impacted globally the situation, and so as large countries, India and China, looking for ways and means to stabilize the situation, at least in the Asian region. So this meeting contributes possibly for such kind of alternative perspectives.
Well, China and India together, our population make up almost 1/3 of humanity, right? So we do have a lot of weight. However, economically, we are both developing countries. Professor Zhang, what kind of common interests do China and India see in terms of, in the surrounding of these profound changes that we're talking about?
Well, I think development and security are the main focus, not only faced by China and India, also by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization members. So both countries, India and China, regard the development as the top priority for both countries. So I think these two countries should find some ways to strengthen our cooperation in all areas, including politics, economy, security, people-to-people exchanges, external exchanges, and also some mechanism building. So this is the first. On the security front, of course, there are some border disputes between the two countries, but both countries have decided not to let the border issue to overshadow the cooperation between our two countries. I think this is a good sign. And actually, China has already put forward the proposal to other countries where we have disputes with other countries to set aside disputes and seek joint development, seek cooperation. Actually, China has resolved the land border issues with 12 neighbors out of its 14 neighbors. So I'm sure China and India will find some ways to overcome their obstacles that in front of them.
Professor Kondapalli, earlier you mentioned the perceived Chinese activities into Russian territory, if I understand you correctly. How much confidence is there among Indian observers that the border issue will be kept under control, at least not to disrupt the warming political and economic relations between these two countries?
Well, on the borders, we have 6 arrangements on confidence-building measures, starting with the 1970s and then Peace and Tranquility Agreement. When President Jiang Zemin visited India, we had CBMs in the military field, in the conventional field. Then later on, we added the Border Defense Cooperation Agreement and a host of other, tactical level confidence-building measures. So I think overall there is peace and tranquility on the border. Of course, the Xiamen meeting, both the leaders suggested that there will be additional CBMs in the future. So this meeting in Wuhan possibly would result in much more arrangements in terms of qualitatively enhancing the CBMs. between the two, and possibly more stability on the border areas. But I would like to come back again to one of the recent